Chris Hedges, nice to have you with us today.
Thank you.
For those of you who may not be familiar with Chris Hedges, he's one of America's most insightful cultural critics and authors, and for 20 years was a foreign correspondent in Central America, the Middle East, Africa, and the Balkans for the New York Times for 15 years, Christian Science Monitor, NPR. And while at the Times, Chris and the team received the Pulitzer Prize for his reportage on global terrorism. Chris's new book is The World as It Is, Dispatches on the Myth of Human Progress. It's a collection of his most insightful and timeless essays. Now, Chris, I'm going to ask you just a few questions and let you roll with it, all right?
Sure.
Today, when I watch both the left and the right, I don't care whether it's Rachel Maddow or Keith Olbermann or any of the others, Chris O'Donnell, on the left or on the right, I do not really see progressives. I don't see the people who have the capacity to challenge the existing dogmas and come up with positive solutions. Instead, I see either people of a liberal or people of a conservative perspective. Why are progressives from either the left or right absent from the national debate on just about everything, whether it's health care, the environment, these issues? That's the first issue. And the second issue is, since you have been in the war zones, since you have seen up close and have been the most articulate author I've read about the human toll on the human psyche of what happens when you're face-to-face with death. Your piece on what it means to be in that segment where you put the body pieces in a bag when they've been blown to shreds, and you can't even tell that it's a human body, it's just a mound of flesh, and those images sear into the consciousness. Then why is it that our military adventures, we have no major anti-war protest of people? We don't have the senior citizens protesting anything. We don't have the youth protesting. Some hippies and some real activists do, but they are a tiny infinitesimal minority, and rare is that spotlighted. So talk about what happened to our senior citizens, what happened to the professional class, the upper middle class, the wealthy class. Why are they not engaged in protesting these efforts to get us out of these, which is draining us of not only our wealth, but also human lives suffering and those of the countries we're in? Those are the two issues. Would you take those on, please?
Well, let's start with the issue you raise about figures like Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell and others. These people are courtiers. They function the way courtiers did in the old courts of Versailles or the Forbidden City. They react to the agenda of the day and give it their own peculiar twist of gossip, or but they allow the corporate mainstream to set the agenda. So, for instance, if Fox News is talking about Anthony Weiner, then you can be sure that Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow and others are talking about Anthony Weiner. They have a different take on it, the way courtiers often do. But it is just as diversionary, just as trivial, just as absurd as the gossip about Anthony Weiner that comes from the right. And let's not forget that these people are highly paid celebrities. They're not journalists. They're paid to entertain. They're paid to do this. Even figures like Keith Olbermann, who I noticed when he left, it said that he had a salary of $5 million a year. I believe that's right. So all of these people are entertainers, and they entertain us around the salacious garbage that dominates the airwaves and has utterly corrupted news. Of course, this isn't news at all, but it's presented as news. So the real issues of climate change, of the reconfiguration of America into a neo-feudalistic society where the working and increasingly the middle class are being abandoned, the rise of the oligarchic state, the destruction of civil liberties, the flagrant corruption, not only in terms of the money that disappeared in Iraq, but on Wall Street itself, which is dominated at this point by a criminal class. And we see in the front page of the New York Times today that Obama's czar on regulations is sort of reaching out to see what more they can do to gut any kind of control of this speculative gamble that it once again threatens to implode not only the American but the global economy as well. So I am just as frustrated. I mean, I don't own a TV, so I don't have to see these people very much. But I'm just as frustrated with the faux progressives, the faux liberals who dominate the airwaves as you are, because of course they don't discuss anything real. They discuss precisely what the corporate mandarins want to be discussed, albeit from a purportedly progressive or liberal viewpoint. But they are reactive in that sense, and they are about entertainment. In terms of the other question, the passivity, we have really effectively been frightened by the state, and this has paralyzed us. We are now about to enter one of these interminable presidential election cycles, campaign cycles, where you can be sure that is the only thing the Democratic Party will offer us, and that is fear. Fear of Mitt Romney, fear of Michelle Bachmann, or whatever monstrosity the Republicans cough up. But I think at a certain point we have to step back and say that our collaboration with the Democratic Party has not worked. It is true that the Republican Party is cruder, more rapacious, more heartless, more craven in their service to corporate interests. But the Democrats, and Obama epitomizes this, are utterly passive in the face of corporate power. They will not throw up any impediments to the corporate disfigurement of America. And we forgot, as Karl Popper, the great Viennese philosopher, pointed out, that it's not our job to ask, the question, how do we get good people to rule? That's the wrong question. The question is, how do we stop the power elite from doing as much damage as possible? And having lived in countries like France, I can tell you that is by making the power elite frightened, and that comes through movements. It comes through standing fast around moral imperatives, which unfortunately we have not done, and therefore have been unable to halt this inexorable slide to an America where there are a rapacious elite pulling down $900,000 an hour and 1 in 6 American workers without a job.
I appreciate those insights, Chris. This is coming from Nicholas Confessori from Common Dreams. It says, quote, "A few weeks before announcing his re-election campaign, President Obama convened 24 Wall Street executives, many of them longtime donors to the White House's Blue Room. The guests were asked for their thoughts on how to speed the recovery. Then the president opened the floor for over an hour on hot issues like hedge fund regulation and the deficit. Mr. Obama, who enraged many financial industry executives a year and a half ago by labeling them, quote, fat cats, and criticizing their bonuses, followed up the meeting with phone calls to those who could not attend. The event was organized by the Democratic National Committee, kicking off an aggressive push by Mr. Obama to win back the allegiance of these very campaign sources." Here's my question. These are the very people who use the deregulation of the Glass-Steagall Act to engage in casino capitalism, derivative positions, creating a new bubble in commodities. In fact, one of the largest bubbles right now that the average American is not aware is happening is when hedge funds are buying up enormous tracts of land in Africa, the richest soil remaining in Africa, so that they can then control what is grown in the price of those commodities and water rights for the future. In other words, they are already looking to create a commodities bubble. When people can't afford food, they will be able to get enormously wealthy, even beyond their own wealth now, by selling people who need the food because they own the land. The Chinese are doing it in South America. They're doing it also. The Chinese are also doing it, by the way, in Africa. So the last remaining green places in Africa are being bought up by hedge funds, not because they're going to eat any of the food, not because this food even will be brought into the American marketplace, but it's the world marketplace, and people have to eat, so they'll say, here's what you have to pay, and if you can't pay it, starve, but we're thinking you'll find money to pay for this, your government will pay for it. It's all about greed. Those are the very people Obama's sitting with. Those are the people that the Federal Reserve gave money to, 22,000 transactions in secret, $3.2 trillion, and we were kept in the dark about that. Why can't Obama invite you, Gerald Celente, Rubini, Stiglitz, or any of the other people who have some knowledge about how we could help the American consumer Main Street, instead of once again saying, Wall Street, if you give me more money, I'll see that no one touches your capacity to make even more for yourselves. Your thoughts?
Because Obama understands where the centers of power are. And it is the financial class that you just delineated. And he knows that if he wants to retain a position within the White House, he must serve those centers of power, and if he does not, he's finished. We don't live in a democratic state. The interests, the needs, the rights of the citizenry are irrelevant. They don't matter. And we have just seen that over and over and over. Every piece of legislation that is rammed through the Congress mocks the very phrase consent of the governed. The Obamacare health plan turns out to be the equivalent of the bank bailout bill for the pharmaceutical and insurance industries, $400 billion in subsidies, and co-payments and premiums are being jacked up enormously. My own just jumped $400 a month to $2,000 a month. When you have a third of the country that is living on under $40,000 a year, they can't make these payments. And so there are an increasing number of people who are literally dying, $45,000 a year, because they can't get proper medical care. And yet the federal government, which is the only institution large enough to protect us from the predatory practices of corporations, serves the interests of those corporations. And the screws are just being turned tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And as my friend, Father Daniel Berrigan, says, these corporations know only one word, and it's more. They have no sense of limits. They will push and push and push, and in essence, they're cannibalizing the country, along with the ecosystem that sustains human existence. Everything for them is a commodity that they exploit until exhaustion or collapse. And in that sense, Karl Marx was right. Unfettered, unleashed capitalism is, at its core, a revolutionary force.